Cammy, we've got all our normal questions, but by far the most pressing question is how on earth do you have time to talk to us? Thank you so much.
I've literally just come back in from. I've had two ewes aborted today, so I've just been away getting orphan lambs to put onto them.
Wow.
And I've been trying to get them to mother up, so I've just come back from that. So we'll do the podcast, get dinner, and then I'll go back out and latch the lambs on again till they get used to it. So yeah, we make things work. We make it work.
I was driving the other day, 2 days ago, and I saw a field full of lambing sheep, and but they were tiny. Do you know what I mean? I thought, God, those lambs are so small, and I thought this is probably the worst time of the year for us to be doing this with you, because I guess that's your busiest time, right?
Yeah, coming up to it, we're not meant to officially start until the 7th of April. So, this has just been an unfortunate thing that's happened with these girls. But yeah, there's still plenty to do, but it's that kind of thing. All my sheep are outside. It's now getting dark, so really, once it's dark, there's not much you can do with them. So we should have been fine. It's just we've had this unfortunate event today that means I'll need to run back to the shed later. But yeah, we're coming into the manic season for sheep farmers.
Do you also enjoy it? Is it the most enjoyable time of the year too?
Every year you're excited for it to start, and then 2 or 3 days in, maybe a week in, you think, when's it over? The novelty wears off quicker each year.
I was watching one of your videos earlier, the one on your Facebook, which is how do we run 1,000 sheep?
Mm-hmm.
And your wife had one of your kids strapped to her back, and she was running a sheep. And I guess it's all hands to the pump, right? When those really sort of high peaks of work come in.
Absolutely, and we're at a tricky period just now where we are starting a family. So Lizzie, my partner, she used to be a professional sheep shearer, so she's very able and very physically strong and fit. So she would do 50% of the sheep work easily. But obviously now she's with 2 young kids. There's another one due at the end of May. So, we've got to consider that she's now 30 weeks pregnant. So it's making life, it's almost that kind of thing. Things are getting harder before they get easier. We're hopefully producing a future workforce here to make life easier for us when we get older. But things are going to be tough for the next little while.
Oh my goodness, amazing. So should we go back to the beginning, Cammy? You tell us, where are you from and how long have you been doing this?
Yeah, so this is, I was going to say this strong accent. This is me putting on a really nice accent to try and speak clearly for the audience. I am from Ayrshire, which is in southwest Scotland, and born and bred in farming. My father was a shepherd, so born on the farm, always worked with sheep all my days, and through a mysterious series of events, I went from being a shepherd's son to being a police officer to being a sheep farmer, and with a little bit of YouTube and other things mixed in there as well.
So did you always want to be a policeman when you were a kid? What happened there then? Why did you make that decision?
It was one of those things, because my father was a shepherd. Essentially, a shepherd is like, an employee of a farmer, so there was no direct route into farming and no farm to take on, essentially. So he kind of steered me down the route of, you should maybe go to university or get a trade or something like that. And I came to the end of my school time, and I could have went potentially actuarial maths, I think was the course I had applied for and been accepted on. But when I worked out, the amount of debt I would have, and I'd have to go and work in the city, and it wasn't really for me. It coincided with the time that the SNP had just came in Scotland, and part of their manifesto was 1,000 more police officers in the street, which ironically is what they need to stick in their next manifesto as well, because things are so bad up here. But the adverts were everywhere, radio, TV, like the old school war posters of "Your country needs you." It was that kind of marketing, and it just caught my eye one day.
What, your country needs you?
Yeah, it was that. Those old school posters with the finger pointing. I'm not that they didn't use those posters, of course, but it was that type of marketing. It's like, we need you. Come on, be a police officer. It's great. And yeah, I'd never planned to be a police officer, and within about 3 months of seeing one of these adverts, I was accepted into the training college, just like that.
Wow. And the irony of, Alex Salmond pointing to you saying, come and be a policeman, when ultimately that was his downfall.
Yeah, that's right. It was Alex Salmon back in those days.
So how long did you do that? How long were you became a policeman, and how long for?
Yeah, so I joined back in 2009, I think it was. I was 18 when I joined, and we had a massive training course at that point. You know, they really were throwing the numbers at it. And I went on from there to work in Glasgow. I did 8 years in uniform in Glasgow, and then I did a further 4 years as part of CID in Glasgow as well. So yeah, right at the coal face, you might say. It was an eye opener, like a shepherd's son from Ayrshire, going up to the big smoke and seeing how the world really is was a frightening experience for sure.
How long did it take you to sort of adjust to it and it become sort of normal?
Yeah, I don't know if it ever became sort of normal, like the way people live, and it really opens your eyes to how privileged you are. You know, like I was brought up fairly poor because, you know, there isn't big wages in farm workers, and we were a single income household. You know, we had a great lifestyle out on the farm all the time, but, you know, compared to the other kids that I went to school with, we didn't get games consoles or fancy new bikes or any of this stuff that they got, or never went abroad until I was 14 or 15 when one of my friends took me abroad. You know, my dad never had a passport his entire life, never left the UK his entire life. So very, very old school, kind of poorer upbringing. But once you start going into these high-rise flats in Glasgow, you see what poor really is, and how privileged we are to have all this open space on the farm, fresh air. You learn about hard work, and you know, you're working with your father all the time. To the way these people are living, a lot of, you know, single parent households getting by on benefits, and people give folk on benefits a hard time, but like, it's not some cushy life on benefits. It's pretty hard going, and you really, it opened your eyes to that, to see how lucky we were to be where we were in farming.
You mentioned the luxury of having all of that wide open space, and I do have to sort of claim a connection. So my grandfather he actually finished off his days in Newton Stewart.
Yes.
So I know that part of the world. Yeah, Minigaff. So I know that part of the world very well, and I mean, it's an extraordinarily beautiful place, because where he was where all of the Forestry Commission land was. And I remember just thinking, oh, this place it's like a paradise. And it's one of those parts of Scotland which, for the uneducated rest of us, you kind of don't really sort of see it, right? Because it's sort of slightly removed, it's below Glasgow, and, you know, so it's an extraordinary place, and you are very fortunate, actually. And did you feel that was what actually pulled you back from being in the CID? Was it the lure of home because it's such a beautiful place?
Well, I mean, the fortunate thing for me, and yeah, Newton Stewart is a very beautiful place. That Galloway area down there is like the forgotten part of Scotland, because it's not connected to anything, so you have to go a real big detour to get there. You know, like going through Glasgow and the Central Belt and Loch Lomond and Inverness, these places, it's a pretty straight route up from England, but you have to go really west, and then you have to go west and then south to get to this Galloway Peninsula, and it gets kind of forgotten about down there, but it is beautiful. But with regards to the CID and coming back, the whole time through, while I was in the police, I was either, you know, I started learning to shear sheep for some extra income. I was constantly working with my father throughout that time, so I was still getting that fix of working with sheep and working the country. I never moved out of Ayrshire, so I always travelled up to Glasgow. But it was only 30 minutes, it's not a big commute, but I always stayed in Ayrshire, so it was great. The balance was great. You would go and deal with, well, it's pretty tricky situations, and sometimes high pressure, high stress situations, and then on your days off it would be great, you could go and work with sheep at home, and sort of revert back to that lifestyle that you know so well. So it was great for the balance, for your mental health as well as anything else, because yeah, it could be stressful at times, the police job.
And how is sheep farming today, generally? I mean, I know that farming overall is under a lot of pressure, but how have you found it in the last few years?
Yeah, it's actually quite good just now. It's at a good point, and then there's a combination of things that have led to that. One of the main ones being, the they say a shortage. There's certainly huge demand in Europe for lamb, and 31% of our lamb in the UK gets exported to France. Oh, certainly 31% of Scottish lamb gets exported to France. Almost another 20% goes to Germany. So half our lamb is going into Europe, and we actually don't eat that much lamb here, especially in Scotland. I think England eats 6 times as much lamb as Scotland. And that is largely down to the fact that England has a much larger Muslim community. So it is in the same way the reason that France is such a big importer of lamb, huge Muslim community. So the Muslim community in the UK, which is a very strong community now, is actually fantastic for the sheep sector, because it's a widely eaten meat and favoured meat by that community. Yeah, so it's good for us just now. Another factor is there's a thing called blue tongue on the continent, which has now crept into Kent, and I think potentially moved its way up to Norfolk. But essentially that's come over in the midges. Because it's been so bloody mild this winter, and we haven't had a good frost, the midges have come across the channel with this blue tongue, and at the moment, like, exports to Ireland and any other countries are totally locked down, and there's been huge losses in the sheep flocks in Netherlands and France and Germany as well, I believe, which has increased demand because they're short of lambs. So now they want our lambs. So it's not great to hear of other farmers having a hard time, but it's been fortunate for us at the moment.
Well, it's very interesting.
Do you also think that we were talking about the SNP earlier and policing, but do you think there's a significant change imminent? There's an election coming, and I think most of us know that there's going to be a new party in. Regardless of who comes in, do you think there's a big political change around the way that farming is managed, or do you think it sort of tends to be fairly constant?
Yeah, it's a touchy subject. The whole farming thing being such. Recently, it's eased off a bit because I think they're starting to realise the error of their ways. But farming was a huge target for, blame farmers for the environment. That was a big thing for a while. Or blame cows, more specifically, seemed to be the big thing. But I think now they're starting to see the research and the evidence to show that actually this is a bit of a fugazi. It's a bit of a, divert your attention to the farmers while we just keep, sending planes all around the world, or we keep pumping out oil. The farmers are the little guys with a terrible marketing, no marketing budget. So keep it in that way. And sure, agriculture can do things to be better. Absolutely we can, and I actually think we're being very, very good in that sense, because we see it. Farmers don't pretend like the climate crisis isn't a real thing. We're well aware of it. We know we all need to play our part. I think what sometimes upset farmers is the farmers expect either the farmer gets the blame for the whole thing, or they're expecting the farmers themselves to sort the problem. And the one that upsets them the most, and you might have seen it in Wales recently, there's been big protests, is they have this idea that the answer is just to plant trees. And the amount of farms, there's dairy farms up with us, which is like the best of ground, are getting bought by the Scottish Government and planted in trees, which is just to meet a quota. They're not I don't mind the right tree in the right place, but when you're taking the best of productive land out of production to put trees in it, it's going to bite us. It's going to come back to haunt us someday when food security becomes a priority over the climate. Because you better believe, as soon as people start going hungry, they won't care. They couldn't care less about the climate.
Yeah. And you said the right tree on the right land. So one thing I noticed and especially around, I think, Newton Stewart, is there's a lot of pine there, and I know that's very productive for forestry. But actually, it's not very good for the biodiversity of the area, is it? It doesn't really support much, wildlife. Is that what they've done around you as well? So they're just putting pine up because that's, photogenic.
Well, it's quick growing, isn't it? I think that's the big thing. It's quick growing. They're going to harvest this and, have a booming timber industry, which we already have in Scotland. But yeah, absolutely. I think David Attenborough, was it one of his shows recently, did a great piece showing a natural native woodland and the diversity, the biodiversity that's there, the the different wildlife that live within it. And then it showed you one of these pine forests that had been thrown up by like a Scottish forestry type thing, and it's just a desert underneath. It's totally desolate. There's nothing there. And anyone that's walked through these places will know what I mean. It's just dark, and it's just pine needles on the ground. There's no other life or plants growing. It's there's Scotland's covered in those. I think they're starting to see a bit of sense with that, and realise they need to plant some more native woodland and maybe some more of your hardwood type longer growing trees. But the reality is, you're planting things like oak, etc. It takes a bloody long time for them to grow into something substantial compared to these pines that are 25 years or whatever they are. Your other problem is, like with a lot of things in life, once you put a number on something, all they focus on is the number. So if the Scottish Government has said, we need, now I can't remember if they said something like 15,000 hectares was their target, or so many trees. Once you put a number on that, it doesn't matter where those hectares are or what type of trees it is. It's as long as you tick that box and hit that number, you've succeeded. So sometimes you I'm not saying you take shortcuts, but you go the cheapest route, or right, there's a bit of land there, right? It doesn't matter if it's too good for trees and it's very productive food producing land. We need it to hit this quota, and I feel that there's a lot of that happening.
Yeah. Can we go back to the police? What when did you change to farming, and how did you get into getting a farm? How did that all happen?
Yeah, so police was great. I joined at a great time. When I started my team in the community policing teams in Glasgow city centre, there was 33 cops on the shift. It was a well-staffed shift. I spent a year and a half riding about on a mountain bike in the city centre of Glasgow, like just targeting problem areas, doing the things I wanted to do. You had time to do those things back then. Now, when I left the police 3 years ago, that same shift had about 8 cops on it. So it went from 33 to 8. And that's pretty a good example of the way things are across the whole force. It's a shocking state of affairs now, it really is. And I think it's just going to get worse, because police used to be, it was a career for life. If you're a police officer, you're a police officer for your 30, well, back in those days it was 30 years. Nobody left being a police officer. That was them until they retired. They got their great pension, and they were always a police officer, always a shot back in sides, 6 foot tall. That's you for life. And they started changing things. When I joined, it was 35 years for your pension. Still great. I was 18 years old. I'd retired at 53 with a good pension. Then they changed it again after I'd joined. And after I'd signed up to this pension plan, that you'd have to work to your 60. So I would essentially do 42 years service, which actually, by the time I'm 60, will still be a bloody great deal, because, hey, you might not even get a state pension by then. We might be up to 75 to retire. But I just thought, the chances are they're probably going to move these goalposts again, and things were getting a bit ridiculous with paperwork, with the things police were expected to do, and I just thought, from maybe 5 or 6 years in, I was starting to think I'll need to, at some point I'm going to do something different. And it just so happened that when I turned 25, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and one of those, typical stories, you get 2 months notice, and yeah, sure enough, died pretty much bang on 2 months later. And straight away I'm like, grief was the big thing, because it was very old school. My dad's my hero. That was that kind of setup. So I was like, how am I going to work with sheep now? And I kind of went into it was, looking back, it absolutely was grief and a way of coping, but I just went and bought some sheep and put them in my mum's garden. Four sheep I bought, and worked away with them. And then I got a little bit of ground, and I got 40 sheep, and I got a bit more ground and a bit more ground, to the point where, we've 1,200 sheep running now, over about 1,000 acres across Ayrshire. So wow. Yeah, it's in the last 8 years that is now since that happened. It's fairly grown, and it got to the point when I was running these sheep and still going to the police and doing crazy things. Like, there's this thing, before you're 30, you're invincible. So I could do a full night shift and then work all day and then go back and do another night shift. Have an hour's sleep and then do another night shift. don't get me wrong, I was CID, so I wasn't working too hard. But after turning 30, it was just a case of I can't recover from that. Like, if I did a night shift and did a day's work and then tried to do another night shift, it would be like I'd been on the drink for 3 days. You know, I was like I had a hangover. I just couldn't. I was shattered, and I thought something has to change here. So that's when I made the jump and said, right. I had my YouTube channel started by then, which is the Sheep Game. I'd started selling a bit of merchandise off the back of that, and actually I'd replaced my police wage through that. And I thought, well, if this can cover the police wage, let's jump, let's dive in, let's do it. And it's that old story, you wish you'd done it years ago after you work up the courage to do it.
It's fascinating. And when you've got 1,200 sheep. The way that you run the sheep, though, does that differ to sort of standard sheep rearing? I mean, what do you do that's different, and or is there anything that you do that's different?
You know, one of the great things about sheep, and, you know, farming sometimes has issues with animal activists and stuff having a go at them. The dairy industry gets a hard time from a lot of people that just don't understand what's happening. But with the sheep thing, the sheep industry and the way we do sheep hasn't really changed that much in the last 1,000 years. You know, they graze, most of them just graze grass all year round. They might get a little bit of extra feed before lambing, but they graze grass all year round. They lamb, they keep grazing grass. It's a beautiful ancient art form of working with sheep, and it hasn't altered. We've got better medicines, and we've got fancier shearing equipment and nicer looking hurdles and pens. You know, the hardware and stuff has changed a bit, but the actual method of rearing sheep and looking after sheep is virtually the same as it's always been. So most of us with sheep they'll do slightly different things. You know, some people might lamb the sheep inside for a couple of weeks. Some people will lamb them outside. Some people will feed them. Some people won't. You know, slightly changes, but generally speaking, 11 months of the year, sheep are out on grass.
What could you talk us through a sort of typical day at this time of year?
Yeah, so this time of year I am out. It's good now. We're getting light about 6 o'clock, so we'll head out about 6, and it's good. Your sheep. So I'm feeding my triplet ewes. That's the ewes that have 3 lambs inside them. I give them some concentrate feed. And by starting first thing in the morning with first light, your sheep get into a nice routine of the sun comes up. They go, right, sun's up, Cammy will be here any minute. So they'll go and stand at the gate and wait for me. And it's an interesting thing. They start, almost that anticipation of me arriving starts their digestive fluids going, almost that way, like if you know dinner's almost ready. You know, or you start salivating and you're thinking, oh, it's good, it's steak pie tonight. It's the same with sheep. So they start getting in this nice routine of, they start getting ready for food. I obviously arrive at the gate, I'll feed my sheep, those triplets first thing. I then go round, we generally split the rounds into sort of 2 days. So one day I'll do half the sheep, and the next day we'll do the other half. So they're checked every second day at this time of year. Most of them, some of our bigger girls, like, we'll rent a lot of ground from retired farmers, and they'll love having the sheep there. But obviously, any problems, they phone us, which is great, but they'll be casting an eye on them all the time. So a popular thing with sheep at this time of year is getting stuck on their back, because they get, and an interesting thing a lot of your listeners might not realise is that a sheep will die pretty quickly if it gets stuck on its back. But just because of the way its internal organs are situated, gases build up and it essentially asphyxiates upside down. But because they're now big and pregnant, they'll sit down to sleep, and because that big pregnant belly, they'll relax and sort of roll over, and they'll wake up and they'll be like, oh no, how did I get here? So we have a lot of people at different farms that just keep an eye out for those kind of emergencies, which is great. And touch wood, we've not had any this year, not had any losses from that this year.
So sheep rolling is a thing.
Sheep rolling is absolutely a thing. Yeah, nobody will ever criticise you.
I don't know how, one of those things you find on the internet, you don't know where it comes from, but I saw some guy the other day and he'd stopped his car, got out, crossed a field, pushed a sheep back onto its feet, and then ran back and got in the car again. That was
I saw the same video. yeah, and good on
a
him.
good deed.
Yeah, I saw the video. I thought, good on him. With his trainers on, was he trainers on? I think. Well done, that man.
Yeah. It was
so just to be clear, if we do, so if anyone who's listening to this does see a sheep that's on its back in a field, they should stop the car, get over there, right it, and then get back in the car.
Absolutely, and no farmer will ever be upset with you being in his field if you're going to roll over a sheep. No, it's something to what if you see all four legs in the air, there's a problem. And if they're not moving when you get close, it's probably a waste of time rolling their back over. You're probably too late.
Oh no! Oh dear. What? So where did we get to in your daily routine? Have we got to lunchtime yet?
So sorry. Yeah, we'll at this time of year, because we have 1,000 acres all over Ayrshire. Yeah, that'll take me a large chunk of the day just to get round all the sheep. I'll then usually go into. We have an office as well where we base the sheep game merchandise. So we do merchandise sales for the sheep game. We do it for a few other YouTube channels and influencers and businesses. So we sort of drop ship for them as well. And then we've got a podcast studio for Fed by Farmers podcast that we do. And occasionally, just now we're trying to fit in some extra podcasts so that we've got enough content to keep me going through lambing. So quite often, I think we've 3 booked next week, but we're finished for this week, but 3 booked next week in the afternoons. We might have a bit of that to do, and I've also got a video editor that started with us now too, so I'll usually touch base with her. Maybe drop off some memory cards, or she'll quickly transfer them onto the computer so that she's got something to work on. And yeah, just generally make plans. There's always questions and emails and things. I have a girl called Iona who co-hosts the podcast, who is like she does everything for the sheep game and the business. She's just a legend. But she'll always have a ton of questions, like people wanting to know this, I want to know that. Like when you guys dropped an email in, like, do you fancy this podcast? I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And there's always something to deal with there. So that I also have 2 kids to spend some time with as well. So it's amazing how long things take when you've got a couple of toddlers with you.
You're making I don't know about you, Andrew, but I'm feeling very guilty about how little I do.
Yeah.
I don't have time to do anything. I don't have any children. I don't have a farm with 12,000 sheep to look after. Oh my God.
Those days I dream of those things. Those days I dream of that life. Don't worry.
I was just going to ask you, actually, when do you find the time, or do you not find the time to sort of take a break? I mean, I imagine it's so all-encompassing, and from dawn till dusk, right? 365 days a year. So do you ever think, okay, this year I'm gonna take a week off? Does that ever happen, or how do you step away?
Yeah, holidays aren't really. Farming's different. I think sometimes for people on the outside looking in, it's very hard for them to understand because we are working constantly. But it's to me, it's not really work. Like, I just want to do this. I'm excited to go out in the morning. Like, I want to go and see my sheep. And then I went to the Rugby World Cup. I went to the Scotland-Ireland game, and I was in France and back home within 16 hours because I decided actually that's it. I'm not going away again for games because I actually just don't there's always stuff to do at home. I want to be at home. I want to be working on the farm or pushing forward doing something else. The thought of a holiday, I just couldn't enjoy it. I would just be too anxious to. And a lot of farmers are like that. You'll quite often find that if they've found themselves a partner who's not from farming, they'll be under severe pressure to go on holiday. But then they'll quite often go that holiday and they'll constantly be like, oh, I should be at home doing this or doing that, and they struggle to enjoy it. But I dare say as the kids get older, we'll need to start making an effort. My sort of get out is that my partner Lizzie's from Devon, and Devon to a Scotsman is like the Bahamas. It's always warm, it's always sunny, the beaches are lovely. So that'll be our answer to a holiday. We'll drive down to Devon for a couple of days. And it's cheaper. It's cheaper as well, which is obviously an important thing for a farmer.
Incredible then, the rise of your podcasts. when you started your first one, the first one was a sheep game, right? It was what did you say, 8 years ago?
Yes. No, the actual sheep game YouTube was 2019.
Oh, okay.
So 5 years.
Was it just a bit of fun, or did you have an idea that it would, that it could come on to where you are now?
It was one of those crazy things. YouTube is so it's such a big platform. There is virtually a channel for everything on YouTube. But in 2019, I was doing a lot of Snapchat and banter with my friends in the farming community, and someone said you should start a YouTube channel. And when I started looking into it, there was nobody doing a sheep YouTube channel in a sort of outdoor UK type system. There was a girl called Sandy Brock who's huge in Canada doing an indoor system, but there's nobody doing vlogs of our kind of system here in the UK. So for a platform to like YouTube to be like the first one to do something is just unheard of these days. So I was fortunate in that way that I had that kind of route in. But it's still, like you're talking about, I start a podcast and straight away we're at 5,000 listeners. It took me 14 months of editing videos and keeping it going just to get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Just to get monetized, 14 months of hard bloody work. Whereas now, what you find is people will do TikTok first, and then they'll just transfer that huge following over, and they'll be monetized within a couple of days. But yeah, that was the hard yards, and thankfully now we've built a following that I can transfer into other things. We've transferred it into the Fed by Farmers podcast, and we can transfer it into my partner Lizzie started a YouTube channel, so straight away a lot of my following jumped straight over to her. And I also have a YouTube channel called Shearing Season, which is now at nearly 60,000 subscribers, and that's just me going about shearing sheep, so it's a more kind of niche thing, but again, you can transfer a lot of followers over to that.
Yeah, I saw one of your shearing videos was 1.9 million views. It must be extraordinary.
But Martin, you were 1.8 million of those.
Yeah. It's like that one. I think that's maybe the one in the sheep game. But we've one there of the Fiona the sheep that was that mad story of the world's loneliest sheep. I think her one I've been shown is like over 2 million views now. It's
wow.
It's an interesting thing, sheep shearing. It's such a viral video thing because the first video we ever did in that channel, like properly edited for shearing season, just yesterday hit 1 million views. So for your first video to do 1 million views is insane, and there's just something about sheep shearing that people love, absolutely love. ASMR, I think they call it.
ASMR, exactly.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate that the farming community, especially in the UK, has really got behind me, and us, I should say, the whole family, and what we're trying to do, because my story is like we don't have a farm, but we're hoping in the future to buy our own farm, so we're very much up and coming, and people can see that we need to make money to get to where we want to be, because buying a farm's a bloody expensive thing. So people have been great getting behind us, investing in us, buying stuff, and we, our stuff. I know everyone says this, but we do pride ourselves. Everything we put out is like custom made specifically for us. It's not sort of generic stuff. It's made for us because we do so much now. We can order in vast quantities, custom made. So that we have so much repeat custom because of that it's really grown arms and legs and became hugely popular. So yeah, if it keeps going the way it's going, it's great. I think our thing we need to look at next is probably increasing the number of YouTube videos I put out for the sheep game, and because we have a girl now helping edit, who's fantastic, absolutely brilliant. So if I can keep throwing content to her and she keeps getting the videos out, that will grow that channel and also grow the revenue on that side as well.
That's amazing.
You said that you took 14 months to get sort of really get going. How long was it before you were able to sort of make income from it?
Yeah, so after 14 months you get 1,000 subscribers and you get monetized. But then like you do all that work to get monetized, and in your first month you might get like £14. If you're doing well, it's not just a case of you get monetized and you're suddenly Mr. Beast. It's a real slog even from there, but like I don't mind. I'm always very open about the money side of things, so I mean I'm happy to talk about the money side of things, because it's always such a mystery for me when I was up and coming and trying to work out what people were making, and could you make a living out of this? Could I because all the money I make, like, I just spend buying sheep. Like, there's no fancy cars or flash clothing or anything like that. I just spend it all in sheep. So, I mean, this month, for example, we're going to make £2,700 from YouTube, which is, like, considering that I know I have the expense now of a video editor, and that's certainly helping things, and that revenue will grow over the next few months, but, I mean, that's pretty solid, you know, for not what is not, in the scheme of YouTube, it's not a big channel. That's a pretty solid number to be bringing in, so it's great for us. It makes a huge difference to massive difference to our business. So yeah, we're very fortunate, and I always like. That's
a lot of sheep you can buy. I don't know how much is a sheep.
Well, that's the other thing. You know, a kind of breeding sheep would be about £150 to £200, but it's more the cost of keeping them alive and fed and all those running costs that the YouTube's great for. But as I say, we've sort of taken a step back to take a step forward. You know, we've taken a step back in terms of the fact that we now have an editor to pay, and Iona as well, who works for the Fed by Farmers, the sheep game. So we're taking a big step back. Initially, we're going to obviously make less money, with the view that hopefully, certainly with the editor and Iona making things more efficient, we can, if not make more money, have a bit more time to do other things on the farm than just be running after the sheep game all the time.
Look, Cammy, I'm aware we were talking about stomachs rumbling and sheep salivating at the thought of dinner. So I'm probably keeping you from yours, am I?
I can hear it. There's certainly some sounds coming from the kitchen. I've not been called yet, but we're getting there.
Andrew, did you have any final questions?
No, I just wanted to say thank you. It's been absolutely enlightening. So we really appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, guys. Absolute pleasure, and all the best for the podcast.
Thanks very much, Cammy. That was absolutely fantastic.
Absolute gentleman. Thank you very much.